Having actually watched my fair share of benchies being printed in real life, this is absolutely true to how it would do this. Look at this. It's printing from an uploaded STL in just a simulation. That is awesome. Well, it is a rather exciting day because not only did Opus 4.6 come out, but GPT-5.3 Codex from OpenAI has also been released. Now, this model is a little different than Opus 4.6 in that the methodology in which we will be using it today to test will be entirely through the Codex app. We're not going to be able to speak to this just through chatgpt.com, although you could if you use Codex through the web, but that's besides the point. So, in first look at this blog post, there are some rather bold claims made in here, just touching upon the purported capabilities of this model. So first and foremost, the thing that really struck out to me right here was that GPT 5.3 Codex is our first model that was instrumental in creating itself, which makes me uncomfortable to read that sentence. Speaking of that, there are two things I want to specifically mention, because this introductory blog post is of course just serving as an introductory blog post, so there's not a ton of detailed information here. For anyone interested in that, they do have a Codex system card linked, and if you click on that, there is a much more intricate PDF with a bunch of other benchmark charts and things like that. We can see right here there are comparisons to previous models and Codex versions, so just keep that in mind for anyone who really wants like further reading. The other thing right there is if you would like to follow me on X, the username is highlighted right here. To take a brief look at this, one of the first things that shows up right here is a benchmark chart, as one would expect. But the interesting thing about this chart is it's not only giving the comparative performance to previous versions of this model, but it is actually showing the number of tokens it used to reach those scores, which are better than the previous models. More importantly, at least to myself, and I think pretty much anyone who's paying for this stuff, is the number of tokens it used to achieve these results, which were significantly less than the previous 5.2 Codex and 5.2 model. So this essentially means, to put it simply, that you'll be able to code more, as they say right here, and the efficiency in the increase in what it can do with fewer tokens is really fantastic. Now, really, there were just some pretty bold claims in this, like talking about how it can do things on a computer that like anything developers and professionals can do on a computer, this can nearly do. So that is a pretty bold claim. And of course, they do have some more benchmarks here. And I like seeing this because this is apparently an iteration of a previous benchmark they showed when the Codex app release came out. They had made this game to highlight just something that it can do. And then this was an increase in improvement from 5.3 in that game that was generated for the Codex app with 5.2. Now, I do have to say, these racing game prompts are a fantastic idea and something I may have to use. And we also see some additional things here like quality of life to better understands your intent. Now, there was something, again, up here that I was extremely feeling very warm and vindicated by, where they talk about improving this race result down here, and they say, generic follow-up prompts like fix the bug or improve the game, which are things I like to do in these testing, which sometimes I get flack for, and they say that it still works. So honestly, I hate saying this, but as these models become more and more intelligent, I almost feel like there comes a point of convergence where the human talking too much to the model is going to be detrimental to the end result, and perhaps we're reaching that more than one would think. So we're going to begin with the browser OS test. There were some issues I had in trying to use this for this style of almost rapid fire testing, because this is designed to kind of work slowly and agentically. It's not necessarily the interface to be using the zero-shot tests, but for a first look, I want to get the widest variety of different flavors basically out of this model and give it a bunch of tests so we can see a bunch of demonstrated capabilities. So let's take a look at our GPT Codex 5.3 browser OS. Okay, it's not very good. I'm going to be honest with you. Well, let me rephrase that. Aesthetically, upon first glance, this is rather disappointing. There is no right click. We do have a clock with a date, which is nice to see. Even the clock shows the seconds. There's no right click. The background image is kind of ugly, and I think the most blatant issue here is that the application icons are not actually very good looking. But regardless of that, let's test functionality, because functionality and aesthetics are not necessarily intertwined with these tests. So let's start with our start button. Get it and subscribe. So with that, okay, Nebula Browser OS. Great, I've seen that before. Notes, terminal, snake, time capsule, about, settings, tic-tac-toe, calculator, cycle, wallpaper. Good. Canyon heat, pine sky. I like how it named these. Cloud deck, solar calm, harbor dawn, Canyon Heat, ugly. I'm probably going to I'll stick to Pine Sky for this one. Okay, so we have a notes application. The UI elements here are not that bad. It kind of reminds me of almost like a Windows 7 aesthetic. Hello. Okay, not bad. Auto-saved in local storage. Can we minimize it to the taskbar? Yes, we can. Let's continue going through our apps right here. So the next thing we're going to do, let's just do my Nemesis calculator. This is actually a pretty good looking calculator of all the results I've seen. 77 times 7. I shouldn't have done that. 493. So let's try the calculator application. Oh, good. It does work. So it did look good. All right, what else do we have? I suppose I can just click on this stuff here. Terminal. Okay, Nebulous Shell V1. Again, another terminal 2 in one day that don't use the homebrew look. The homebrew look, of course, being... Oh, I was trying to use a Linux command to open the terminal app on the Mac. This is the homebrew command look. Time capsules is special because it snapshots full desktop state. Open apps, positions, note, game progress, and can restore everything in one click later. Understandable. So let's test the special feature real quick. We'll open a few different applications here, including About, Notes, and Terminal. And then if we save this capsule, time capsule has been saved, then hypothetically we should be able to return to that saved state. So it's almost like it just saves the window manager or the window location. This is a well-implemented special feature. Let's restore the latest time capsule. That's cool. So again, the aesthetics let this down, but it seems like the functionality on the back end is pretty good. I'm going to just keep going through this maybe a bit quicker, and I'll have to decide how to do this, because in agentic coding like this, the proper thing to do would be like, okay, this looks like crap. I need you to go ahead and make it look better, but the functionality is acceptable. So like the snake game is good looking. It's just the overall lack of icons and the lack of right click was very frustrating. I hate to say this. One, I've kind of started to not completely hate this game. But two, I've become much better at it. See, like that, like no one else is going to be able to do what I just did there. Oh. All right, well, moving on. We have our settings app where we can just do the wallpaper change. And again, I like the way that these are actually specifically, we have an active tab and stuff like that. So functionality here is very good. It's just the aesthetics are not necessarily the best. And I think we can try to give it a chance to fix the aesthetics, keeping in mind this isn't necessarily like a fully traditional first test where we just give it one try. Next up, we're going to do the 3D printer simulation test, and I may go back to the browser OS test at a later time here in this video just to have it kind of overhaul the aesthetics. But for now, I want to try a bunch of separate tests before we go and focus on iterative improvement, which we will touch upon in this video. So this might end up being kind of like a longer video, but there's more we can do with this, being that it is agentically functioning. All right, it looks like our printer simulation is now all set and working. I think basically I'm going to just ignore all of this server mumbo jumbo right here, and instead I'm going to just open this specific repository, and we'll open it in Google Chrome. Let's check out our 3D printer sim. That's very good looking as well. Okay, we hit a wall there. Why did it put like a random cube there? You know what? It doesn't matter. This is very good looking. I will say this is the best filament spool model that I have seen in doing this test. There's not any plastic on it. This is more reminiscent of an empty filament spool, but just it understood completely the objective. The printer has some oddness to the gantry and things like that, but really, I suppose the next step is to just try and see what happens. Now, I know folks have said you need to change this test so it can accept STLs and see if it will actually generate like the toolpath. That is something that I'm definitely open to doing. Wow. That's very, very good. Look at the infill. And that was it. It drew a brim around it at first. That's very, very well done. Orange filament. I'm not in love with the color orange. If you watch the channel, you know that for darn sure. So thank you. But also look at this. This is really quite well done. And this is the Opus 4.6 result was good looking, but it did not have the infill as this. This is far more literal to the actual, at least printing of said shape. Look at this. I mean, we even have XYZ coordinates being printed out as it actually moves around. And this is a Core XY printer. So instead of a bed slinger, which was very unique to see from the Opus 4.6 result, this is kind of just how a faster, more modern printer would work. And this is, I mean, this is fantastic. In terms of the actual printing of the shape, this is fantastic. Let's see what it does for the top. Let's see if it actually fills it in. Nope. Okay. Well, that's okay because that was incredibly, incredibly well done. Now let's try our circle. It draws a brim around it first, which I love to see. And the infill, decent. We have cross hatching. We have layer by layer. I'm going to speed this one up because we kind of get the gist of how it's going to work. Wow, if I slow this down, actually, that printer head movement that we just saw, where it moved over from the corner right here to start doing infill, was so smooth. This is very well done. Let's just finish it off now. Now let's do the triangle. I'm going to slow it down again real quick, just so we can actually get some. The nozzle movement here is fantastic. It's very fluid, and this is if you've ever just sat and watched a 3D printer, which I don't know why anyone would do that, but you'll notice that this is really very similar to how the nozzle would move in real life. So this is great to see. This is a very, very good result. Hey, check this out. So this is something I neglected to notice in the Opus video until I watched it, where the spool was rotating. It was a little funky. This spool is actually spinning properly as the nozzle moves right here as well. So this put an incredible amount of thought into this implementation. Very impressive. So this next prompt is going to be the Flight Combat Simulator game, and for this I have just enabled the Develop Web Game skill or tool. So this will help it just to do the best possible job in this, as I'm very excited to see how it does with this result, because honestly these are always really fun to play. Using the Develop Web Game workflow, I'm going to build a single file browser game with a 3D dogfight loop, then validate it, etc. Alright, so we'll let this ride. I have to go feed 2 dogs, and then we'll see how the result looks. To be honest with you, it just I think it was just trying to make sure every single fine-grained detail in this game was fine, but the amount of time this is taking is just... It was a little frustrating, so I stopped it and I said, just give me the damn file, dude, WTF, come on. And then it said, I already built it as a single file game. I'm confirming the exact path so you can open it and play it immediately. So it seemingly gave me a bit of snark back, but we do now have our flight simulator game. Keep in mind, I stopped it a little prematurely, but it had already fully generated this thing a long time ago. So, all right, let's start our dogfight. Again, this is almost kind of like what we saw earlier, where that's actually nice. It's not as aesthetically pleasing. This is like the browser OS, where it's not as aesthetically pleasing as some of the other results I've seen, but it is actually quite playable, and the logic and everything like that is very good. This seems to be very smart and capable, with the downside that it doesn't seem to be very aesthetically pleasing. And you could say, well, oh, you made it stop a little prematurely. It would not have gone and remade these plane models. So that is just kind of how it did. It almost made like a paper airplane simulator game. There is no real like map texture or anything cool, but the gameplay and logic and everything like that does work very well. This is one of the more playable results, though kind of like with the browser OS, it is a little disappointing, just like in terms of its aesthetic qualities or lack thereof, where we see, okay, each plane is just like a different color. These almost look like kites. So, and again, this is, just a first try, but I would have liked to have seen something a little better off the bat, I think. I'm now giving it the C++ Skatepark game test. This will be one that will be extremely interesting to judge the result of, because 1, it's very fun to play, but 2, it's seeing how well it can perform in a language that's perhaps less commonly seen in some of this testing. So this will be very interesting to see how it does, and I guess that's probably all I had to say about that. All right. It teased us because it was checking the game here and it launched it real quick. I very much like what I'm seeing there, and I'm very happy to report that this put a person on the skateboard as well instead of just the traditional capsule. That's something Opus 4.6 did as well, where it put an actual model of a human, which was awesome to see comparatively to the traditional capsule that is representative of the player. So, okay. It's just telling me how to build and run this, so I'm going to carelessly copy paste this code into my terminal on this system. I like this. All right, let's see. So we have different, okay, ollie, 80, ollie. All right, let's try our kickflip. I think we have to be moving to, we have to be in the air with the ollie. Bail, combo lost. Pfft. Can we grind? QE, spin left and right. Oh, okay. Let's go on. Whoa. Uh-oh. Reset run R. Okay, good. Let's see if we can. That's some good grinding logic, if I do say so myself. All right, can we do like a kickflip onto the rail? Oh, look at that. Ooh, you can actually do, so again, with the logic being really good in everything we've seen here, like it's allowing me to do tricks while on the rail, which is kind of, that's really cool. All right, can I make this bigger? Yeah, I can. I apologize for not having done that prior. The person is kind of like, it's an interesting, all right. Let's do a heel flip onto the rail. Oh, this is cool. What are the, those are probably just the boundaries of the park. Let's go off one of these ramps. We'll go slow so we don't yeet off the half pipe like what happened before. I will say this made this result rather quickly. I'm quite pleased with what I'm seeing here, especially the logic that enables us to actually properly snap to the rail, one, to grind, but also the ability to actually perform tricks while grinding on the rail is pretty cool, and I've not seen that before. Like, that was really good from a gameplay logic implementation perspective. Everything we see right here is fairly impressive. I'm quite happy with this. Now, I know some folks are probably going to be upset I haven't used plan mode so far, so we're going to do a Python 3D first-person shooter test, and for this specific test, I will initially enable plan mode so it can plan out what it is going to do for this implementation, and then we'll have it build it based off of that just to get some variability in the testing here. And it's asking me some follow-up questions here. What do we want? I think I'll go with number 2. How should opponents behave in the initial diversion? Simple bot AI, moving targets only. Yep, I like that. How should code be organized? Single file script. It recommends a small modular project. Okay, because it's testing an agentic model, I will relent and allow it to not do this in a single script, but a small modular project instead. So it has culminated in the build plan. I'm just going to allow it to continue and implement this plan. So now we'll go ahead and, based off of the initial plan mode where it had some specific questions for us, it will create our 3D first-person shooter in Python. All right, let's test our Python 3D FPS. Keep in mind, if you see in the terminal right now, this is in a drum kit folder. I had intended to do a drum kit test, but instead I did the 3D FPS. So without further time being wasted, let's check Neon Arena. Ready to deploy. Use arrow keys to navigate. This looks quite well done. And something I'd noticed that it was doing when it was testing this and running unit tests and things like that, it said the hitbox for the enemy was too low for the eyesight of the player. So we can see this is well done. The minimap does work properly. Although the controls are a bit funky in terms of inversion, we do see we have these little box enemies. Overall, nothing super special, but it does function properly. All of the logic seems to work, and when we die, we just went back to the home screen. So that was overall a successful result, and I did want to give it the opportunity to do it in its plan mode 1, and 2 by allowing it to make a tiny little project instead of everything contained within one single script. So I'm updating the hand-drawn wireframe of my portfolio image, which of course is the Stevie Slappis portfolio website, and as a final simple test before we move into the next part of this video, which will actually be enhancing some previously generated results, I want to just give it the opportunity to build this wireframe into a proper website. And this one's just kind of like a fun test. I don't pay too much mind to the specific prompt. I've just said build a beautiful website from this wireframe, make it aesthetic and have mega wow factor. So we'll see how it does. I'm turning your wireframe into a high impact portfolio landing page. Wow. That is very, very in line with the source image. Welcome to my portfolio, Stevie Slappis, or Stevie Slappis. I build polished digital projects with bold visuals and fast, reliable code. Look at the effects that it put here. Also, we see the mouse has some effect in the background of this page. Explore work, book a call, skills, JS, TypeScript, React. Okay, these all have interesting fast hover effects on them. Contact hello@stevielapis.dev. LinkedIn, GitHub, 32 projects delivered, 6 years hands-on experience, and mostly satisfied clients. This did a very good job keeping this true to the stylistic depiction of the wireframe. It didn't make it very beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, but it kept to the source. So I guess that is part of the test, is I think it's expected to see them keep to the source like this. Now for part 2 of this video, we're going to take some of the previously generated results that I found were rather lacking in visual aesthetic qualities, mainly the 3D Flight Combat Simulator and the Browser OS in specific, and we're going to ask them for changes because both of those had absolutely fine logic in terms of the gameplay or functionality in the case of the Browser OS. I'm going to just tell them that the logic is sound, as we see right here. I'm just having it create the Flight Combat Sim and make it much better. So the map is flat, the plane models are boring. Make this polished into something that looks like an actual flight simulator, not a my first game demo. So we're going to see that this will inevitably take a little bit of time. It is going to use the develop web game scale flow, and I'll be very interested to see how the improved results are, because as much as I want to just do a bunch of rapid fire different tests like I do in or did in the Claude video, this is not necessarily designed to be used that way, so it would be doing a lackluster due diligence to just kind of ship it with a bunch of one-shot prompts without allowing it to actually excel in the agentic fashion in which it's designed to do so, which would be iterative improvement of results. So that's what we're going to do in this part of the video. So we have the first of our improvement round results, starting with the Flight Combat Simulator, where we had just emphasized the visuals were pretty bad and it needed to improve them. So it says it now has gone ahead and done so. I'm very excited to see what it's done. I think we can probably hope for something good looking. Okay, it's significantly better. I'll say that in terms of the visuals, it did definitely improve them. The minimap is actually pretty cool. I think it says tactical radar up there. It's just, I'm not a fan of the plane models that it made, to be completely honest with you. But again, I suppose the artistic judgment is more of that was actually pretty cool. And okay, so we can crash. Let's start with the propeller plane. And it's just very abstract, and I don't know that I love that for the Flight Combat Sim. I'd like something a little more realistic, and I did ask it for that in the specific follow-up prompt that I'd mentioned. But again, the gameplay and the logic stuff is really good. This is quite playable. The fact that the enemies actually have health bars as well as I do, the smoke effects, the chaoticness to this like combat is very good. It's just that the visuals are not necessarily up to what I would have hoped to have received. And now I feel comfortable saying that, being that we did give it a second chance with a specific thing to fix. So I don't know really what to say. I mean, the smoke effects, the trail, the way we just fell into the ground, this is all well done. Look at that. I mean, it's frustrating. I'm very excited to put this head-to-head to Opus 4.6 in an actual dedicated agentic video with like a single specific purpose, because I think this would be very cool. You know, the more I play this, kind of the more I'm warming up to it, because it's so abstract, but it is very unique. See, like, that's okay. Did that plane just fall apart? This is pretty cool, actually. I wonder if it built them like this so parts can fall off of them. I have warmed up to this in the time that I started playing the second version till now, is something I'm going to say honestly. So for our next upgrade test, I want to focus on the 3D printer sim. Now, this was admittedly probably one of the best results I've seen for this, so I want to push it even further. A lot of folks in testing in the comments have mentioned, hey, you should try to modify this so you can actually upload a STL or stereolithography file, I believe. And that's essentially what the printer actually understands with to print a real object. So if it does successfully do that, I will then upload an STL of this thing. So for those who are not necessarily into 3D printers, this is called a benchy, and it has almost become like lore in the 3D printer world, as you print this as your first print, and it's designed to benchmark your printer's capabilities. So this is almost akin to like a physical version of some of the benchmark testing we do in these specific model videos. So I'm going to ask this for what is going to be, I would think, a rather difficult implementation, and that is to modify this little website to actually accept STLs and then generate the G-code or toolpath to print said STLs. So from what I see right here that it has done, supposedly according to just this chain of thought right here, it had a mention of OpenSCAD, which is something that if you saw my previous video in Codex versus Anthropic Claude Code, we actually had them create a physical product using code. So they created the 3D enclosure for these two products that I have right here, and that was using OpenSCAD. So it seems this actually went ahead and generated a sample STL file, tested it with the script, and now has reported that it seemingly did work. That is rather impressive. And again, this is just seeing it function in a domain that's not necessarily strictly like build me a website. This has to understand some cross-domain things as well. So this will be very interesting to test. Okay, this is the correct one. All right, so we have our file upload STL right here. Let's choose our file. We'll go into our downloads where we just saved the Benchy, and then start print should hypothetically now print this STL file of this Benchy that we just put in. All right, so let's try this again now that I've correctly selected STL. We have uploaded a little 3D STL of the Benchy print file, and now let's see if this simulated printer will actually properly print this uploaded file. It is. It's doing it, and it's doing a darn good job as well. That's so cool. Again, I don't know how difficult this was hypothetically to implement, but this just completely knocked it out first try. And having actually watched my fair share of Benchies being printed in real life, this is absolutely true to how it would do this. Look at this. It's printing from an uploaded STL in just a simulation. This is quite good. I'm extremely happy that whoever had suggested this in the comments originally, thank you very much, because this is a fantastic improvement to actually seeing how far we can push this printer sim. I mean, look at that. This is very cool to me, and I think a lot of folks will find this interesting as well. That is awesome. We just uploaded an STL to our 3D printer simulation, and it printed it in its entirety just from an upload. I mean, speed this up. Watch this. It's going to print this Benchy now at full speed. And this is something people like to see, the speed of their printers with this as well. That's just very good. Now let's give it a chance to improve the aesthetic qualities of this browser OS, and kind of in the same way that we had it improve the Flight Combat Simulator, we'll tell it the logic is sound, but the aesthetics were very lacking. Now I had sadly closed this, so I just reopened the directory with this specific file in it. I'm not sure how that will change the end result of how this will go about fixing it, but it should be able to read and understand what it's looking at, being that it is a relatively simple example. So I'm just telling it this browser OS is very ugly. The logic is good, but everything else is pretty bad. And I did in parentheses kind of passive aggressively say, aside from the lack of a right click menu, but the aesthetics are bad. Please massively improve the look and feel. You want a major visual overhaul? All right, so we'll see how this does. All right, so here is our supposedly aesthetic improvement to our desktop browser operating system. All right, I think maybe this is just the style it wants to go with, because I personally am not a huge fan of the aesthetics here. Doesn't necessarily mean it's kind of ugly. I'm not even going to try to be fair. I find it ugly, but it did implement the right click menu, and again, the UI and everything like that's not so bad. I just think I really hate the desktop applications. They're letting it down, and the background is also quite ugly. Maybe if we go back to that, definitely not that. What was the other one? Pine Sky definitely makes things a little easier on the eyes, if I do say so. I've been up for a while. So, okay, we have change wallpaper, our time capsule, open notes. And again, it wouldn't have actually changed any of the functionality here. It just made the aesthetic a little better. So if I were to, perhaps we'll put this side by side with the previous iteration, and we can see it almost just like went dark mode on it, but it is a little better. Did it change any of the application UIs? Yeah, but again, it almost just kind of went dark mode on them. So I respect it. It stuck to its guns. And you know what? That makes me appreciate this result a little more, perhaps. It's still ugly, but it's a good result functionally. Logically, everything we've seen so far has been quite well done. I think the final thing I'm going to do here in terms of a result improvement is with the C++ Skatepark game, which was really a quite decent result. I'm just again going to ask for a visual enhancement of this game, making it look more polished. So I'm asking it for a more animated rider, add in some sounds if it can, and saying the visuals are a letdown, make them more polished, as realistic as you possibly can. And we've started just, of course, by saying, as has been the entire theme of this video, the logic is fantastic. All right, here's our updated Skatepark game. I will full screen this. Now, it definitely did a better job in the rider. It's almost ragdoll style. However, I'm going to be completely honest with you. The rest of the park, the faces are messed up, and folks have commented on what may cause this in some other videos. So sadly, that is frustrating, but I guess we'll just focus on the ragdollishness of our rider here. We'll see if we can find a rail to grind on. I think, unfortunately, the gameplay has become significantly worse here because it's hard to see, one, and two, no, just that it's hard to see. I mean, the tricks look awesome. We were able to get on the rail here, even if it's a little not properly rendered, and doing tricks on there is, the animation looks really good. Look at the rider. We actually see the arms kind of swinging out how they would in real life. Well, you know what I mean. That was a smooth landing, and the camera work there that I was doing with the arrow keys at the end, that was very, very cool. So overall, I think this is probably going to wrap this video up. This did take quite a bit longer than I'd anticipated because in the beginning of this, I just figured I could do like some rapid fire testing akin to what we did with the Opus 4.6 video. But unfortunately, that's just not necessarily the right way to test this. And it would have done a disservice to the model, being that it's designed to be able to iterate on its things. So this video is not at all intended to be a head-to-head comparison to the Opus 4.6 video. I will put these head-to-head in their proper agentic harnesses with the same exact prompts and the same exact task very soon, but I want to just kind of reiterate that this is a different style of test, and I wanted to give this thing a second chance to implement improvements to the tasks that I deemed were worthy of said improvements, which it absolutely did. Basically, everything that we started out with that needed improvement, the logic was fantastic. Everything worked logically first try. The only issues were really aesthetic. Now, I think honestly the winner for today is going to absolutely be this 3D printer simulation with the introduction of the ability to upload an STL file and print it. In this case, we have it printing a Benchy, an actual file that is designed to be printed on a real printer is being printed in our simulated 3D printer right here through the STL file upload. This is a really impressive feature that it implemented. The fact that the spool is actually rotating when it's printing as well, and the movement of the nozzle, as we saw when first looking at this, was extremely impressive when we slowed it down. It was very smooth and lifelike. The plane game, you know, I've warmed up to it a bit because the actual gameplay is really good. It's just I'm not a huge fan of the aesthetics. Though, again, aesthetics are more of an subjective taste. So, then our browser OS, I'm just not 100% sold, again, on the aesthetics of this, but the functionality was all there, even though the second time it did implement the right click, but not in the first time. So, really, that is probably going to conclude our first look and testing of the newly released GPT-5.3 Codex model. I am very, very excited to continue testing some of these models in different manners and doing some head-to-head. I have a lot of ideas now, just seeing how some of these are being marketed that I think may be pretty interesting. Hopefully, at least I will find them interesting, so hopefully folks watching do as well. With that, that is going to wrap up today's video. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and thanks for watching.